Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we've got a truly fascinating topic lined up for you. We're going to look under the hood of international diplomacy to examine the unique challenge of managing a legacy UN peacekeeping mission. We often see those blue helmets on the news, but we rarely see the massive, complex administrative machinery that keeps them fed, equipped, and operational in the field. It's literally like trying to run a medium-sized city, but right in the middle of a conflict zone. Today we're analyzing a comprehensive 50-point strategic guide detailing the role of the Chief of Operations and Resource Management for the United Nations Peacekeeping Force in Cyprus, or UNFCIP as it's known. I absolutely love this document because it takes what you might think are dry, bureaucratic mandates and reveals the beating heart of an organization fighting to stay resilient and effective.
Okay, let's dive into this. 60. That's how many years UNFICP has maintained its core buffer zone monitoring function. Just think about that. Keeping an organization running for over 6 decades requires an incredibly resilient operational engine. And unlike newer missions that might be rapidly expanding their scope, a legacy mission like this one survives on strict operational efficiency, intense cost discipline, and continuous improvement. It is a completely different kind of logistical beast. So, here's our agenda for the explainer. We'll start by looking at the 60-year mission context, then define this engine of operations, break down the 4 pillars of support, examine risks, resources, and resilience, and finally, look at building long-term impact.
Section 1. A 60-year mission, the Cyprus context.
Operating out there in the Eastern Mediterranean, UNFCIP faces some pretty intense pressures that are totally unique to sustaining a legacy operation. Established by the Security Council way back in 1964, the mission has maintained a buffer zone between the two sides on the island since 1974. Now, because it's one of the UN's longest-standing operations, the focus today isn't on some massive, large-scale mandate expansion. Instead, it places a massive premium on cost discipline. All support practices have to align perfectly with evolving UN headquarters policy, all while operating under extremely strict efficiency mandates.
Section 2. The engine of operations, defining the role.
So, who exactly is the mechanic keeping this massive engine of peace running? Well, we are talking about the Chief of Operations and Resource Management, which is a P5 level position. Essentially, they're the central nervous system of the mission. Reporting directly to the Chief of Mission Support, this role is responsible for bringing coherence to cross-cutting support functions. Now, what does all that bureaucratic language actually mean for us? It means they are the vital link connecting high-level mandate goals with the gritty, logistical, on-the-ground realities. If the grand strategy doesn't make sense operationally, this is the person who literally has to fix it. The sheer scope of this role spans 6 broad domains, and it requires deep technical expertise across all of them. You've got oversight of the core support sections, strategic planning and risk mitigation, human resources, finance, ICT and procurement, and finally, service delivery and continuous improvement. The guide explicitly notes that this requires a leader with serious change management capabilities, someone who can navigate periods of extreme liquidity constraints. It's an absolutely incredibly demanding portfolio.
Section 3. 4 pillars of support, HR, finance, tech, and procurement.
Now, what's really interesting about this breakdown is that instead of treating these departments as isolated silos, the guide makes it crystal clear that these 4 functional pillars must interlock perfectly. It's fascinating how repetitive compliance tasks actually synthesize into a unified strategy. Think about it. In human resources, the priority is policy compliance to ensure fair staffing. In finance, it's business intelligence and stewardship for risk management. In field technology, robust services actually drive innovation across all the other pillars. And in procurement, it's contractor quality to control costs. This proactive strategy gives the organization the confidence to plan over multi-year horizons.
And that brings us to a crucial anchor point in the strategy. The guide states, institutional credibility, once damaged by inconsistent or poorly justified practice, is slow and costly to rebuild, making early and sustained investment in this area a form of preventive institutional insurance. The guide repeatedly emphasizes this idea. Managing disputes in HR, finance, or tech early on acts as crucial insurance. Unresolved disputes don't just cost money, they erode the credibility of the entire UN mission.
Section 4. Risks, resources, and resilience, navigating constraints.
Of course, none of this happens in a vacuum. The chief constantly has to navigate some really harsh operational realities and anticipate external shocks. The guide lists some pretty severe risks. You've got diverging positions between headquarters and the field, which is a classic friction point, along with data quality vulnerabilities, funding shortfalls, and unexpected political disruptions. And critically, staff turnover in a highly mobile international organization leads to a massive loss of institutional memory. The core strategy here is that the organization must act on early warning signals rather than reacting when it's just too late. They even compile recurring risk themes into a standing watch list so they can spot patterns over time.
When they're fighting for budget, the guide insists on a very specific financial distinction. So the crucial point is explicitly separating a one-time, short-term resource investment to establish a new practice from the ongoing resource commitment needed to sustain it long-term. The source argues that conflating these two figures tends to drastically understate the long-term affordability of a new initiative. By separating them out, leaders can make much better, highly transparent prioritization decisions.
So how do you actually go about implementing new operational guidelines in such a high-stakes environment? Well, the guide outlines a meticulous, step-by-step approach. It starts with Step 1, a structured diagnostic phase to identify gaps. That's followed by Step 2, which is technical consultation and pilot testing with volunteer offices to really stress test the approach. Then comes Step 3, a formal review and a phased rollout, perfectly timed with governing body sessions. And finally, Step 4, continuous monitoring and feedback loops. This super cautious phasing drastically reduces the risk of costly revisions after formal adoption.
Section 5. Building long-term impact, the legacy of improvement.
You see, the ultimate goal of this P5 role isn't just to survive the daily bureaucratic grind, it's really about building a long-term impact. The document outlines specific capacity building and technological shifts used to elevate field offices. We're talking about e-learning modules, peer learning networks, digitizing workflows, and implementing strict disaster recovery and business continuity plans. And this brilliantly illustrates their strategy, designing for offline and low bandwidth contingencies. The guide explicitly recognizes that a brilliant technological solution that is unusable from a low connectivity duty station is, for all practical purposes, completely useless. They absolutely have to design for the actual realities of the field.
So, how do they know when they've actually succeeded? The guide offers a truly fascinating metric. The ultimate test of long-term impact is when staff and offices actively resist reverting to the previous way of working. That right there is the true benchmark of embedded success. It means they've institutionalized a culture of improvement so deeply that the old, inefficient, bureaucratic habits are permanently rejected by the people on the ground.
We've seen how UN-FICEP acts as an engine of peace, requiring constant, meticulous maintenance, and it leaves us with a pretty provocative thought as we wrap up this explainer. As global operational demands shift, how can massive legacy organizations continuously adapt their institutional engines without sacrificing their foundational stability? It's a tricky balancing act between rigid compliance and necessary innovation. Keep that question in mind the next time you see a headline about global peacekeeping logistics. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible strategic guide.